The driveway looked wrong before I even turned off the engine. There were cars, sleek, unfamiliar ones jammed up on the gravel, squeezing out the space where my little sedan usually rested beneath the magnolia. A man in a polo shirt rolled a cart stacked with folding chairs past my bumper without even glancing at me. I opened the door slowly, my hand still wrapped around the wheel, like I needed to steady more than just the car. A white tent stretched across my lawn, anchored at the corners by sandbags. Strings of lights hung from the eaves of my porch, and someone was hammering stakes into the ground beside my azaleas. At least 3 people were already inside, walking in and out, like it was theirs, like I didn't exist. My chest tightened, not in panic, not yet. In something slower and colder. I stepped through the open gate and saw a woman adjusting floral centerpieces on folding tables. Beyond her stood Marla, clipboard in hand, in full command mode. She didn't see me at first. She was pointing to the corner of the yard near my grandmother's wind chime. "I want the cake table over there. If the breeze picks up, it'll make such a nice backdrop for the vows." She turned and then froze. Only for a second. Then came the smile. "Celeste, perfect timing," she called out like we were at brunch. "Can you help with the place settings? We're trying to finalize the seating chart." "What is this?" I asked, my voice tighter than I meant it to be. "Oh," she laughed lightly. "Didn't Evan tell you we're having the ceremony here next Saturday? It'll be beautiful." She walked over, touched my arm like we were co-hosts. I didn't answer. My eyes were already on the table behind her. A stack of cream-colored envelopes sat beside a silver pen. I picked one up and read the embossed lettering. The marriage of Evan Rylan and Marla Dean. 148 guests. 129 Pelican Ridge Road. My address. I stood there in my own yard holding an invitation I hadn't been invited to write or approve. The paper shook slightly in my hand, but my voice didn't. "You printed what I said." She blinked, feigning surprise. "Oh, we just assumed you'd be thrilled." I was 57 the day I signed the papers. The realtor handed me the keys with both hands, like it was something sacred. I cried in the parking lot of the bank, not because I was sad, but because I had done it completely alone. 3 jobs. 17 years of putting off vacations, cutting coupons, driving a car that coughed at every red light. All for this. This house wasn't just wood and drywall. It was proof I had survived the divorce, the bankruptcy, and the long silence after Evan chose to stay with his father. He was 17 then. I didn't blame him. I just kept working. When Evan came back 2 years later asking for help with his student loans, I emptied half my savings. When Marla lost her job, I sent grocery deliveries to their apartment every week without being asked. The day they showed up at my door with 2 duffel bags and nervous smiles, I told them they could stay for the weekend. That weekend turned into 3 months. They said they needed time to figure things out. I made them coffee every morning and folded their laundry when they forgot it in the dryer. I told myself it was temporary. Family supports family. When Marla needed to come by just to use the Wi-Fi, I gave her the spare key. I labeled it with a little tag, emergency only. I never got it back. After that, they started showing up without warning. I'd find the thermostat changed my books, moved dishes I hadn't used in the sink. One time I came back from a work retreat to find Marla had hosted a yoga weekend. 6 women I'd never met sleeping in my guest rooms. Every time I brought it up, Evan would just shake his head and say, "Come on, Mom, it's not that serious. We're family." And every time I let it go, I thought boundaries would make me look cold. I thought if I just stayed quiet, they'd respect me more. But standing in my yard, holding that wedding invitation, I finally understood. They weren't asking because I had taught them not to. That night, I sat on my apartment couch, the wedding invitation still on the table beside me like a dare. I opened my laptop, not sure what I was looking for, just needing to confirm that I hadn't imagined it all. I started with Marla's name in the search bar. The first thing that came up was a Pinterest board titled Rylan Wedding at the Beach House. I clicked, and there it was. Photos of my backyard, my porch, even the inside of my kitchen. Notes scribbled beneath each image. Great spot for the dessert table. Sunset light hits this corner, perfectly ceremony timing. Must keep Celeste's old rocker for a vintage touch. I kept scrolling. There were Instagram posts too. One from 3 weeks ago showed Evan and Marla standing on my porch, holding champagne flutes. Final venue walkthrough at my amazing mother-in-law's beach house. Can't wait to celebrate with our 150 guests. The caption made my stomach turn. The comments were even worse. So generous of her. You're so lucky to have her. I wish my mom would offer us her place like that offered. As if I'd given them something. As if they hadn't just taken it. I sat back in my chair and closed the laptop slowly. The cushions felt stiffer now, like even my own space didn't belong to me anymore. They didn't forget to ask. They just never planned to. And suddenly, I needed to know what else they thought they were entitled to. I drove back to the beach house the next morning before sunrise. I didn't call ahead. I didn't need to. Apparently, no one else thought they did either. The gate creaked open, like it knew I didn't want to be there. Inside, the smell hit me first. Rose's artificial vanilla and something sharp beneath it, like sour wine. Someone had left half-empty flutes on the porch railing. There was glitter on the floorboards. My rug was pushed crooked furniture slightly off from where I'd left it. In the kitchen, my cabinets had been rearranged. The coffee filters weren't where they belonged. Spices alphabetized, except I never did that. The top shelf held herbal teas I'd never bought. I opened the linen closet and stared at the empty space where my grandmother's quilts were supposed to be. A note sat on the shelf. Borrowed for staging thanks. No name, no ask. Just a casual thank you as if I was a hotel concierge. The framed photo of me and Evan at his high school graduation was no longer on the mantel. In its place was a blown-up print of a beach engagement photo. Him and Marla forehead to forehead, surrounded by warm-toned filters and sunset. I made myself a cup of coffee, black, hot, bitter, and sat alone at the breakfast table. This house used to feel like mine, a quiet place where I could read in silence, water, the porch plants listen to the tide roll in. Now it felt like a borrowed room inside someone else's dream. I opened my laptop again and searched coastal rentals for corporate events. One name stood out: Harbor and Tide Tours, a reputable company with glowing reviews and a waiting list for beachfront venues. I called and spoke to a woman named Elise. Her voice was calm, professional. When I gave her the address, she paused, then said, "We've had inquiries about that location. Are you the owner?" I took a sip of coffee that had already gone cold and answered, "Yes, I am." By the time we hung up, the contract was in progress, scheduled and sealed for the very weekend Evan and Marla had claimed without consent. It was the first time in months I'd said no. I called the locksmith that afternoon. He came by sunset, a quiet man with a canvas bag full of tools and no questions. I watched from the porch as he removed the old brass hardware ones Evan still had keys for and replaced them with deadbolts. I chose myself. By the time he handed me the new set, the house finally felt like it belonged to me again. That night, I composed the email. Simple, direct. To all family members. Effective immediately, 129, Pelican Ridge Road is no longer accessible without explicit written permission from me. Keys must be returned. The locks have been changed. Access is no longer assumed. I pressed send and sat back in my chair, waiting. The first call came from my sister, then my nephew, then Evan. "Mom, are you serious?" he asked, breathless. "You changed the locks." I did. You didn't even warn us. You didn't either." He went quiet for a moment. Then, "You're overreacting. We're family." I hung up. The texts kept coming. Marla wrote a 3-paragraph essay about betrayal and boundaries. Hers, not mine. My brother tried to play peacemaker. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I took pictures of every stain on the guest sheets, every wine ring on the coffee table, every cigarette burn on the deck rail. There were dents in the hallway from a moving cart and a gouge in the kitchen tile I hadn't noticed before. I printed the photos and slipped them into a manila folder. On the front, I wrote in, black marker, evidence of erasure. I installed the new security cameras myself, one at the front door, one by the garden, one facing the driveway. The footage fed straight to my phone. No one would slip in or out again without me knowing. No confrontation, no screaming, just locks, lenses, and proof. By morning, Elise from Harbor and Tide sent over the contract for signature. The restaurant was familiar dim lighting, white tablecloths, and a corner table that always felt too tight. I walked in and found them already seated. Evan, Marla, and of course Aunt Corinne, who had appointed herself head of all family matters ever since my father passed. "Celeste," she said, standing slightly, as if to bless the moment. "We're so glad you came. We just want to talk like family." I sat down without smiling. Marla's eyes were already glassy. Evan wouldn't meet my gaze. Corinne reached across the table, touching my wrist lightly. "Family is about giving dear, about making space. You, of all people, should understand that." I opened my folder and laid it flat on the table. The first page was a photo of my guest room. Someone had tracked mud across the rug. The next was the kitchen counter, burned, then patched sloppily. A cracked flower vase. Cigarette ashes in the hallway. Marla shifted in her seat. I turned to the receipts next. Repair bills. Replacement costs. Cleaning services I'd quietly booked after their casual visits. I watched Evan's eyes trail the totals. None of it was exaggerated. All of it was dated and signed. Then came the screenshots, the Pinterest board, the Instagram posts. Public proof that my house had become a venue, a symbol of generosity I never offered. Marla wiped her eyes, but she didn't say sorry. Evan didn't say anything at all. And Corinne, after a long silence, just shook her head like I was the one who had disappointed everyone. No one apologized. No one took responsibility. They didn't come to listen. They came to convince me to fold. But this time I wasn't folding. I was finished. I parked across the street just after noon. Coffee in hand, windows rolled halfway down. The air smelled like salt in summer, but my stomach was still steady, too steady, for what was about to happen. At 12:45, the van from Harbor and Tide pulled into the driveway. A clean logo on the side, clipboards in hand. Staff in navy polos and khakis stepped out, nodding to each other, moving with practiced ease. They unloaded folding table signage and 3 large ice chests, labeled Client Welcome Kits. I watched as they began setting up the conference tent across the lawn, right where Evan and Marla had imagined their arch. By 1:10, my family started arriving. First, Evan and Marla pulled up in their SUV, looking polished and distracted like people on a tight schedule. Marla was already halfway out of the car before she stopped short, her expression twisting as she spotted the corporate banner over the porch. A minute later, the wedding planner came speeding up behind them, phone to her ear. I watched her face as she spotted the staff setting up trays of branded pens and promotional material. The confusion was almost theatrical. Marla's voice carried across the street. "This isn't right. What is this?" Evan paced the driveway, phone in hand. The first call came, then the second. By the 8th, I finally answered. "What did you do?" he snapped. I took a slow sip of coffee before answering. "You planned a wedding," I said. "I plan to protect what's mine." Silence. "There are people here," he said eventually. They have a contract. They do. Signed and dated. Just like your invitations, except theirs came with permission. You could have warned us. You could have asked. I hung up and placed the phone in the cup holder, watching as they scrambled to redirect confused guests pulling in behind them. The tour manager greeted each new arrival with a professional smile, directing them toward the check-in table. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt grounded. And for the first time since this began, I was ready for what came next. They didn't knock. They buzzed the intercom 3 times like it was urgent, like someone was in danger. I almost didn't let them up. But something told me this moment needed to happen, and I didn't want to run from it. Evan stepped into my apartment, first face tight with frustration. Marla followed close behind, her eyes already rimmed in red, but her chin was lifted like she was bracing for a verdict. "You humiliated us," she said, skipping hello. I motioned for them to sit. They didn't. Evan's hands were shoved in his pockets. "Why didn't you just talk to us?" I tried, I said. "You didn't listen." I walked to the sideboard and pulled out the folder I'd prepared weeks earlier. I placed it gently on the coffee table and flipped it open. First, the deed with my name on it. No co-signers. No family trust. Just me. Next, the repair invoices, dated, signed, all paid out of my account. Furniture damage, replacement linens. Mold treatment in the guest bathroom after someone left the window open during a rainstorm. Marla's face flushed. She looked down. Evan didn't. "This isn't a vacation home," I said, voice even. "It's a boundary you bulldozed." "Mom," he began. I raised my hand, not to silence, but to pause. Then I handed them a single sheet of paper. A list. Simple. No visits without written permission. All spare keys must be returned. No assumption of access ever. Violations end contact, no exceptions. Marla reached for the paper, hands trembling slightly. "This isn't about revenge," I said. "It's about respect. And it's long overdue." They didn't argue. Not this time. Evan nodded slowly, like he finally saw the cost of what he'd been calling generosity. When they left, they didn't slam the door. They closed it quietly, and for once, they didn't take anything with them. Weeks passed without noise. No texts. No unannounced visits. No one treating my house like an open door with their name on the welcome mat. The quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Most mornings I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee legs tucked under me, the sound of waves steady in the background. The cushions were new. The wind chimes had been moved back where I liked them, and every piece of furniture sat exactly where I left it. I had started sleeping better, longer, deeper. Even the air in the house felt lighter, as if it too had been holding its breath for years. The knock came late one morning. Not a bang, not a buzz of impatience. Just one knock, then silence. I opened the door to find Marla standing there alone. She didn't wear the usual gloss of defiance. No clipboard, no practiced smile. Just her hands clasped in front of her eyes, slightly unsure. "May I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She walked slowly, like someone trying not to disturb the air. We sat in the kitchen. I poured her a cup of coffee without asking how she took it. For a while, we just sat there, the steam curling between us. "I never thought about what it felt like from your side," she said. "I just assumed it was always available, that you'd never say no. You never gave me the chance to." She nodded, eyes on her hands. "I'm sorry, Celeste. Not because it blew up, but because you were right. We crossed every line and didn't think we had to ask." I didn't respond with warmth. Not right away. But I didn't push her away either. The apology was quiet. Honest. That mattered more than a show of guilt. "I appreciate you coming here," I said, finally. "The right way." She looked up. "Would you be open to starting again? Not as family who assumes, but as people who ask?" I nodded once. That was enough for now. When she left, she didn't linger. She didn't overstay. And for the first time in years, someone closed the door behind them with care. 6 months later, the house breathes differently. The porch swing doesn't creak from overuse. The doormat isn't crooked from too many shoes. I replaced the cushions with a soft ocean-colored fabric and chose wind chimes that sound less like decoration and more like wind catching its breath. The locks are new. The keys are fewer. Every person who steps through my door does so because I've invited them. Most Thursdays, I host a small pottery class on the porch. Just 4 women from town, quiet, steady hands, and stories that stay in the breeze. We laugh, we shape clay, and sometimes we don't say much at all. I like that no one asks if they can stay the weekend. They always check before coming. Last week, one of them asked what made me start the class. I didn't have an answer ready, so I just said, I finally had room. I think that's true in more ways than I realized. The guest room still has a bed, but it's no longer anyone's fallback. My grandmother's quilts are back where they belong, folded carefully and untouched, unless I say otherwise. The photos on the walls are mine again, not curated for anyone else's story. There are still family gatherings, but I choose which ones I attend and which ones I host. The invitations are fewer, but when they come, they're honest. Today, while packing up the kiln from class, my phone buzzed with a message from Evan. Thank you for teaching me about ownership. I wish I'd learned sooner. I stared at the screen for a moment, unsure how to respond. Not because I was angry. I wasn't. Not anymore. Instead, I thought about the long drive I used to take from the city just to breathe in this salt air. The years I gave away too freely. The steady erosion that happened when I believed love required surrender. Now the surrender is gone, but somehow the peace stayed. I didn't reply right away. I just stood there, looking out past the porch railing where the waves met the edge of everything, and it felt finally like it belonged to me.